What's up, you guys? Sean Ross Sapp, managing editor, FightfulMMA.com, where you can go to get all of your MMA news. If you want wrestling and boxing, hit up Fightful.com as well. We are here on the MMA and Boxing YouTube channel. Subscribe, help us. We got a goal of about 1,000 by the end of the year. We're going to be doing a lot of post shows here, a lot of our weekly shows here. We might still syndicate those on the Pro Wrestling Show, or the Pro Wrestling Channel, but we'll see how it goes. We'll play it by ear, my friends. We had a lot of news really emerge over the last few days, but we are joined by a couple of Torontonians, one of which who was at UFC 231. James, how are you? How was are you back home?
Yeah, I am. I'm back in Vancouver. I got back Sunday morning. For some reason, I had the genius idea of taking the earliest flight possible. So I actually didn't sleep on Saturday. I just went straight to the airport. But I survived. I'm here. That's the main thing. I wasn't here last week, so I'm happy to be back.
It was a 6 a.m. night for me. Like, I didn't get to bed till 6 a.m. covering that show. And you were on a plane when?
I was on a plane at 7 a.m. Eastern time.
Woo! No, thank you. We are also joined by one Showdown Joe Ferraro. Joe, how you doing?
Doing pretty good yourself, guys.
You all can follow Showdown Joe at Showdown Joe. You can follow James at Lynch on sports. But we got a lot of news to get into. And I just want to kick it right off with the big news that we had earlier today. ONE-TNT, who has been making moves nonstop, signing Eddie Alvarez, signing Sage Northcutt, trading for Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson, getting Miesha Tate as a figurehead for the company, has made perhaps their biggest move in North America yet, Joe. They've signed with Turner Sports. They're going to be on TNT. They're going to be on BR Live, which is Bleacher Report Live, a subscription service. 24 events for 2019. This is getting started in a hurry. We're gonna spend quite a bit of time on this, but what were your thoughts when you first heard it?
Honestly, not overly surprised. I know they've been trying to get into the North American market for quite some time, so good for them. Good for them to score in that deal. It's no different than Rizin. Rizin's been trying to get back. I know it's the former Pride banner, but they've been trying to get back into the North American broadcasting scene for quite some time. So I know every time I go there and I travel there to Japan to do the play-by-play, I'm always wondering, I wish this was showing back home somewhere in North America, Canada, or the States. But they've been working on a deal, but good for one. One got a nice deal with TNT, and we'll see where it goes for them. But obviously they're holding their events, and they're trying to get into this North American market. I wonder what that means for the UFC. I don't think it'll mean much, obviously, with them being on ESPN, but it's another player in the industry, from Bellator to now ONE and to other organizations. So they've established themselves in part of that Asia market where they're huge. I mean, they're massive. They got these crazy shows and really good production values. And now we'll see what happens when they come over to North America, what that means for that hardcore fan that maybe wasn't watching online or wasn't able to catch the ONE FC shows, but now can through their own television networks.
James, what were your thoughts when you heard this news?
I think it's great news, and I think it makes sense with the signings they've had. They're really focusing on the North American market. I've said this a million times on the show. They've neglected the North American market for years. And, we hear of how great the fan base is in Asia. Well, we're going to put it to the test now because this is a good network deal. They have some notable names under the banner. We'll see how the ratings do. I hope they do well. I've said this many times. I think that more competition in MMA is better, and it's more outlets for other fighters. And I think this could be a very big positive, but this is a huge step in the right direction. Like Joe, I figured something was going to happen like this, but I'm just glad it's happened before the end of the year so we can kind of have something to look forward to next year.
TNT, I can't stress how big of a deal that is. I mean, there's a book that's out called Nitro, the Rise and Inevitable Collapse of WCW, where the writer spoke to dozens of Turner officials from the 1990s who, quite frankly, didn't think that pro wrestling was in its portfolio, despite it being the highest rated program. And there are some parallels here. But TNT, what better programming are they going to get at 6 in the morning than this? I mean, it could be a situation where, like, you hear that an episode of Cops does better numbers than Bellator does. And that's a very real possibility, that Dawson's Creek or whatever they're showing at 6 in the morning, Supernatural, does better numbers than ONE-TNT. But my question is how the dominoes inevitably fall. Does this make Bellator step up their game at all, James? Because I kind of criticized them this week. James Gallagher getting his first main event fight immediately after being knocked out in 3 minutes. What? What are they? Alessio Sakara main eventing shows and getting knocked out in Italy. they're throwing like back-to-back nights often now with cards that don't need to be back-to-back nights. Bellator is one of the most confusingly run companies. Will this motivate them a little bit, or will just nothing change?
I think nothing will change. I think they're more focused on those, you know, for when it comes, especially when it comes to their international shows, they're more focused on the event, not necessarily the broadcast. You'd hope they learn from this. I mean, Bellator does some good things. The fact that they're in Hawaii this week before the UFC is a very good thing. But the tape delayed stuff, just some of their matchmaking, I wonder, you know, who is pulling these strings and making these decisions when it's clear as day, like by everyone, even like the top journalists, people criticizing Bellator for having their content on tape delay. And you can't do tape delayed content in 2019. You have social media. This isn't the 1950s where you'd have to wait till the paper came out the next day to, you know, see who won the score. I mean, let's get real here. They need to have live content all the time. There's no excuse for it. And, you know, if Bellator wants to be a legit competitor to ONE and these other promotions, they need to show all their content live. And that's my biggest pet peeve with them right now.
Oh, James, I made a joke earlier. Since ONE is on TNT, they got to go 3 minutes early like WCW used to,
right?
And give away the tape delay results of their competition, just like Eric Bischoff would do on the air to Bellator. If you're running, I mean, the confusing decisions continue. MVP and Daly in Connecticut. What?
Well, that I get. Okay, I wanted to chime in on that because I know you guys talked about this last week. I think that is more because I think they don't want the tape delayed content because I think any of their international cards is on tape delay. So this one they wanted to make sure that, hey, the fight's happening and it's live. You can't have that fight on tape delay. I think that was the reason they did it. But either way, it's still dumb.
On tape delay. That's the thing. Like, why does it have to be? They've got DAZN and I mean, for the love of God, they're owned by Viacom.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they've got they can make the decision. They can go up and say, hey, you know, maybe just run a replay that night. We can run it live. Jay or Joe, any thoughts about how this could affect Bellator and competition? Because Bellator will have competition in the States for #2 now.
Well, before you threw it to James, I'm trying to remember, you know, verbatim what your quote was. And I think your quote was, Bellator is run stupidly or something like that, or confusingly. It's an extremely puzzling promotion in terms of their broadcasting. I mean, last show or the show before that, we looked at a prelim card that was stacked that should have had all those fighters on the main card, and a main card which maybe had one, maybe two fights deserving to be on a main card. It's extremely puzzling how they run that promotion. I don't know where it's coming from, whether it's Scott Coker, which I kind of highly doubt, to be honest with you, because he's a very smart individual and been around the promotion game for a very long time. I don't know if his hand is being twisted or tied up by those at Viacom to say, no, we want this, we want that. It just doesn't make sense to what they're doing. And now, when you're looking at these cards that ONE is going to have on TNT that are going to feature the aforementioned names that you stated, like the Eddie Alvarez's and the others that have signed over there, people are going to tune in and they're going to get numbers, not huge numbers, but they're going to get numbers. Like as soon as we know Eddie Alvarez is fighting, we're going to start talking about it. We're going to promote the fact that you can catch it on TNT, blah, 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 blah. Just by that nature alone, anyone that tunes into our podcast live or afterwards will be like, you know what? I'm going to make some time to either watch that live or at least record it. So what will it do for them? I don't know. I don't know, only because just of what we've seen lately, I would highly, think or imagine that they would look at that and say, okay, you know what? We do have to step up our game because what we're doing, if what they're doing right now, guys, in their eyes is making sense, then ONE coming over on the North American network is not going to do anything. Let's just be honest for a second.
James, I want your input. What free agents do they go after? Josh Barnett's out there. Mark Hunt is out there. Those are a couple of big names just right out of the gate. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, sorry, Vitor Belfort, is he still an option?
I mean, I don't see why not. Retired? Maybe not so much.
Well, didn't he sign with Bellator? That was the deal that was on the table?
I can't remember if it was him who did. I don't know. I'm not, nothing official yet. But I mean, they probably will go after some names. And then in terms of just people that have been released recently, maybe you get some of those.
Keith Jardine? What's he doing these days?
Owning a coffee company, actually. With
really,
yeah, him and his wife, who's in the UFC, Jody Escobar. They run it. So
she got a fight book today.
Trick had mentioned that he's acting. He's doing really good with stunt work and getting some really good gigs and acting as well. So
yeah.
So yeah, there are some free agent options out there. Barnett and Hunt are the first that come to mind right now. You never know how PFL deals are going to last, how those are going to work out. ONE FC or ONE Championship, rather. I'm still not used to calling them ONE Championship. Has a chance. They aren't the only Asian company making announcements. Also, Floyd Mayweather, Tenshin Nasukawa. It's on, Joe.
It's on, I guess. I'm still waiting to find out what I'm doing. I don't know if I'm going, if I'm calling it. So it's what, December 11th today. Usually I get my itinerary December 1st. So yeah. So hopefully I get to get down there, but we're getting close. Oh, it's the same thing with Titan, guys. Titan's next Saturday, not this Saturday, but next Saturday in Kazakhstan. So I'm apparently going to Kazakhstan, returning home for Christmas, and then heading back to Japan, and then finally coming home January 1st. As of this moment, December 11th, I don't have any flight itineraries in my inbox. So I don't know if I'm leaving, if I'm going, if I'm staying. You guys know me very well enough. I just keep my mouth shut. If it shows up, great. If it doesn't, I'm home with the family.
Well, I mean, to kind of jive with your point, they announced just this week, they being Rizin, hey, yeah, we are doing a second show, because recently you were like, as far as I know, it's one, but 3 weeks before they go, hey, second show. What would that mean for you if you were to work that show, Joe?
Well, if it's on the same day as the original show, and they're opening the doors at 8 a.m., it's the New Year's Eve show. So, I mean, if you just simply do the math, to get to the arena at Saitama from the hotel that we stay at is a good hour and a bit. So I would have to be at the venue at least at 7 a.m. In my suit and tie, all dressed up, funny makeup on, TV stuff on, and basically stay there till what, 10, 11 o'clock at night? So it's going to be an extremely long day for me and Frank and whomever's involved on the production side. Not complaining, don't get me wrong, but it is going to be a very long day if that's the case. So yeah, the press release, you know, I think James, not sure if you saw it, but Sean, you saw it, that it did talk about streaming and stuff like that. Pretty sure Fight TV is going to air both shows, which means they need English commentary, which means it's probably Frank and I. So if that's the case, I mean, we're getting up at 5 a.m. or whatever it is and showering up, putting our suits on, looking all pretty and sexy, and heading over to Saitama Super Arena and hanging out there all day, and, you know, hopefully get a chance to get a nap in, which I doubt. But other than that, it's going to be a very, very long day, to say the least.
James, the rule set came out for this Nasukawa Mayweather fight. What does it say to you?
Well, I don't know what to expect at this point in terms of how it's all going to unfold. Like Joe said, until we actually see them compete, I mean, the rule sets are out there. Is that going to actually happen? I don't know. You know, again, honestly, it's so unpredictable. Like, this whole thing wasn't even supposed to happen. That now it is happening. Like, I don't know what to expect in terms of what's going to take place. But I mean, at the end of the day, Floyd Mayweather's not going to make himself look bad. So, you know, just keep that in mind.
That's a very good point. Very true. We had UFC 231 this weekend. Man, a great main event. We saw a lot of interesting stuff on this show. James, you were there live. Standout moment of the show.
It had to be the main event with Ortega just, you know, taking those punches. And I think just, you know, just Max Holloway looking the best he's looked ever. There's so many question marks heading into the fight with his health, with him pulling out of the fight in July and the weight cut and all that. And he just completely silenced all those critics. And this was a huge opportunity for him. So much so that he was the betting underdog in this fight, which is crazy. Like, if you think about, you know, how much external factors play into this, people really felt like Max wasn't going to be the same, that, you know, 45 wasn't the right weight class, but great performance by him. I think the main event, you have to take that away, because now it opens up so many possibilities here. Does Holloway go to 55 where there's arguably bigger matchups? Does he stay at 45? You know, we've got Moicano as the backup. That's not really an appealing fight, but he's an option there. You've got Jose Aldo out there, although I hope they never fight again, because, you know, he beat him twice. And then at 55, I mean, there's a whole, you know, row of guys. You got Dustin Poirier, you've got Nate Diaz, you've got, you know, what's going on with Conor McGregor. There's so many things that, you know, sort of open up here. And I think it was just overall, it really capped off what was a really, really, really good card on Saturday. And arguably one of the best cards they've had in Toronto.
Joe, what was the standout moment in that main event fight for you? Ortega, to me, has one of the greatest chins of all time.
Well, I mean, if you aren't applauding Brian Ortega's resolve and just will to win and just continue despite being battered the way he was battered by Max Holloway, you're a jerk. That's just the way it is. I mean, that guy there showed us so much heart and what the human spirit can actually showcase in adversity. I mean, I got all the love in the world for Brian Ortega, but hot damn, is Max Holloway a bad mofo? That guy there, just the pace, and I mean, how in the championship round, in the 4th round, how can you switch a gear and increase your intensity? I have no idea. That guy there is something else. That guy there is just fantastic. I got all the time in the world for Max Holloway, minus something he said in his post-fight press conference. He gets the jerk award for what he said about getting out of the cold countries and going to Hawaii, having an event in Hawaii. You notice the Canadian fans weren't too appreciative of that, but I don't blame him. He deserves to headline an event in Hawaii. Bellator is going there. The only reason why the UFC has not gone there for a couple of reasons was A, the venue, but B, the state tax that they put on events and promotions. I think it's over 10%, guys, if I'm not mistaken. It is a lot. You're giving up 10% of your revenue, guys. Like, that is a lot when you're a promoter. So Max Holloway is just something special. Is he the greatest featherweight of all time? I think everyone is agreeing yes. I've got to do more numbers on it. I'm going to say yes for now, but I do want to take a look at all those numbers as well. I think James had mentioned what potentially could be next. Me personally, I want to see him fight Conor McGregor because he deserves a massive, massive payday. And then give me Frankie Edgar straight after that.
Yeah, I would like the McGregor fight. Dana White really wants Holloway at 155. Holloway is open to it. Dana White says that he has a lot of influence in making that happen. Don't want to see him against Aldo. And at 145, I look at everything and I'm like, man, there isn't a lot there right now at this very moment. You look at the landscape. Edgar just lost. Aldo's been beaten twice. Ortega just lost. You have Moicano. Maybe not a ringing endorsement that he missed weight as a backup fighter. If you're wanting him to make weight, you have Chad Mendez. That's an interesting option, perhaps down the line. People know him, but Jeremy Stevens just lost. Cub Swanson, I don't think will get there. So I don't think there's anything wrong with Holloway taking a fight at 155, James, and kind of letting things work themselves out at featherweight.
Yeah, and a lot of those names you mentioned, like Mendez is fighting Alex Volkanovski. If Volkanovski wins, that's great. He's undefeated, but no one really knows who he is. So you put him in a main event. Same thing with Moicano. Like, I think at this point, Holloway's done more than enough to, if he wants those big fights at 55, I think he's well, he's earned that right for sure. But like you said, at featherweight, there's nothing that's really screaming like, oh, there's anything big. I mean, I saw people throw Yair Rodriguez's name up there. Like, yeah, I get that, but we're forgetting like 2 fights ago, he got completely destroyed by Frankie Edgar. I think you got a gift in Yair getting this win. Let's build him back up again. Let's not throw him to Holloway. I mean, there's a beat out there, but again, the issue with him is that he hasn't fought a top 15 opponent. So he doesn't deserve anywhere close to a title shot right now. And then, of course, yeah, like I mentioned, the Mendez Volkanovski fight's going to be interesting. Aldo, it's funny, like Holloway's talking about how great Aldo is, and he still feels that he's the greatest featherweight of all time. But he kind of in some way hinted that he'd want to fight him again. I'm like, why? Like, I mean, we've seen this twice. And it wasn't close. So I have no interest in seeing that. But I think the UFC should get Holloway to go to 55. Get him to vacate his belt if he wants to, because again, I don't think there's many challenges there, and then do Aldo versus Moicano for the vacant title.
Knowing Conor McGregor the way that we do, though, if you booked him against Max Holloway, he's probably going to say, well, I'll cut to 145. That's the type of guy he is. Because, he loves to have those titles, whether or not he defends them. But I love the idea of those two guys fighting at 155. You don't have to have a title. The main event's 5 rounds. You can have a rare UFC pay-per-view with no title on the line, and I don't think anybody's going to go, oh, gee, shucks, no title on the line. I'm going to pass on this one. No, I think that's an excellent fight. I thought that Valentina Shevchenko defeating Joanna Jędrzejczyk, while somebody confused, like in our comment section, they're like, 5 on Joanna, why would you do that? And I had to explain that is literally if you have $5 to burn, which is why we say we're not picking her, but we'll put 5 on her just in case. Really? Valentina Shevchenko mollywopped Joanna Jędrzejczyk, just muscled her around, hit a beautiful belly-to-belly suplex at one point. This was, in a lot of ways, very reminiscent of their fights, their striking battles that they had early on in their careers until the grappling got involved. But Valentina Shevchenko, who many thought beat Amanda Nunes for the title earlier, I think this year, finally winning her championship. James, your thoughts?
Great to see. She's had to deal with a lot with, the Nico Montano fight, falling through. And then, of course, the fight with Sajara Eubanks got moved around as well. So this was a great win for her. I just think long overdue. Like you said, she had those close fights. She had 2 close fights with Amanda Nunes, actually. So to see her get a championship, I think is great. For Joanna, I don't know. Like, she's talking about going back down to 15 next, but I don't see the logic there. I think this is a new division for her. She looked a lot better. She seemed a lot better, like even doing media stuff this week or last week, just with her competing at 125, not having to focus on those extra 10 pounds. So to me, I don't know why. It seems like Dana also wants her to go down to 115, but it's like, as long as Rose is champion, you're going to be Rich Franklin the whole time. Like, and realistically, like, who else can she fight? Well, there are options for her, but then you're sort of killing those contenders as new blood at the top of the heap. So I would like to see Joanna stay at 125. And for Valentina, this is a new division. I'm happy to see her carry the torch because she was great this entire week. I don't know if you saw the open workouts, but she was doing all these crazy moves and everything. She's great. I think it's sort of a nice thing to see her be a champion, and I think she'll represent the sport well going forward.
If Joanna is forced to 115, she could become Rich Franklin in a more literal sense, with one championship, running domestic shows and seeking out free agents in that regard. One championship has Rich Franklin as a figurehead as well. Joe, Valentina Shevchenko getting it done. Now, I mentioned how close that fight was with Nunes, where she very well could have won. The majority of fans and media, I think, had Shevchenko winning. She beat Holly Holm. She beat Juliana Pena. She's got a win over Sarah Kaufman. She has a justifiable homicide on her record in Priscilla Cachoeira. She has a lot of, also, thank you to Mario Yamasaki for finally stopping that fight just before UFC 231 started, so Valentina Shevchenko could get in the cage and win a title fight. But she also beats Joanna. So you look at this, Joe. She has competed there with some of the top women at 115, 120, or 125. 135, 145, essentially, because you got to put Homa in there. She probably should have been the first 145-pound champion. What does this say about Valentina Shevchenko?
James, in case you missed the last show, Sean and I were talking about this very thing. If she does emerge victorious versus Joanna Jacek, what does this actually mean for her? And my caveat has not changed whatsoever. The bottom line is, for me, the only way we can put her in the top ever, greatest of all time, is a fight with Cyborg. That is it. And I know Amanda potentially will take out Cyborg, which may put her up there, but we all can pretty much agree that Valentina defeated Amanda in their last fight, right? So despite what the judges said there. So it's tough to say. I mean, in watching that performance against Joanna on Saturday, it takes me back to when, I was heavily into striking in a lot of my boxing days and my Muay Thai days. And I used to always get my coaches and instructors, move Joe, move Joe, move Joe, when my natural fighting was counter fighter. I was always a counter fighter. I wasn't very overly aggressive until the opportunity presented itself. And here you have Valentina doing what she did against Joanna. Not much head movement, we saw that, but the understanding of the distance, the angles, and when to attack was just something magical to see a woman do in the cage, to make other men basically be like, whoa, what is happening here? I mean, the explosiveness, some of those takedowns were ridiculous. She got air on some of those takedowns. Like, yeah. I mean, it was unbelievable what she was doing. So I think she's one of the best of all time. I just think that Cyborg fight is right there. I want to see what happens with Amanda and Cyborg in the next pay-per-view. But yeah, I think she's right up there. And, her post-fight comments were more, a lot of it was direct. The first few answers were directed at Nico Montana. Like, that was just simply like, she was, happy and thankful that Joanna's professional and showed up to the fight. There wasn't going to be any issues and all that stuff there. I was like, man, so, what does Valentina do from here? I'd like to see her go on a nice little run, which she likely will. Someone always has someone's number. We know that. But I want to know who is going to be that fighter that's going to have Valentina Shevchenko's number for sure.
Yeah, and Amanda Nunes, to a degree, early on, she had that doctor stoppage against Liz Carmouche way back in the day. And hey, Liz Carmouche is in that division. And Liz Carmouche, I don't think there are a lot of women at 125 that she can't hang with, to be honest with you. I think Liz Carmouche is an incredibly underrated fighter and always has been. But we'll see how it hashes out. But James, who is next for Shevchenko? We had Jessica Ai win her fight. And I mean, my God, if you know, anything remotely positive happens to her, she's screaming for a title shot. And it seems like a lot of her complaints at 135 are rooted in truth, but she hasn't been finishing people or anything. But Shevchenko seems open to the fight.
Yeah, I think at this point it has to be Jessica Eye, just because of the fact she's on a winning streak. You got Sijara Eubanks moving up to 135 now. The options are really slim at this point, and again, it's just one of those, like, people look at it as like, oh, she hasn't deserved it or whatever, but it's really just comes down to timing in a lot of situations. Rafael Assunção was owed a title shot 2 years ago, basically, with the amount of wins he's got. But it's just the sake of the division. There's stuff moving, a lot of moving pieces. And flyweight, not so much. So I think I probably will get it next. I think she's making a lot of noise. Like, people really genuinely don't like her, you know, with her comments, because they think she's, you know, full of it or whatever. So I think that even plays into it, because it's like people want to see her lose or whatever. So I think it will be Jessica Eye next. She in the post-fight scrum, I don't know if you guys caught it, but she was like blaming the media. She's like, you guys got to promote me more and all this stuff. And so it's, you know, it ruffles some feathers, which, you know, I think can be good and bad, but I think that will probably be next. Is
maybe a good idea for her would be to not accuse the media of lying when she failed a drug test.
Right.
Because that happened. I remember that happening, and that was not a good look. But I mean, it's not the media's job to promote her. It's her job to promote her. If she wants, if you know what, if she can reach out to you, she can reach out to Joe, she can reach out to me, she can reach out to, I'm sure Ariel Helwani, I don't know if he had her on his show, but I'm sure he'd love to have her on the show. He has a lot of people on the show.
I interviewed her in her first, when she made her debut in the UFC. She was one of the fighters that was brought in that, you know, we had to promote, and that was part of our gig at Sportsnet. Was I asked for the UFC many, many times under Schaller and before Schaller, give me the fighters that you want me to promote. I'll have a conversation with them, and we will ensure that we package things accordingly to make the fighter look positive and get people to relate to them. And I remember sitting down with her and thinking to myself, what an absolute gem. She is amazing. She's fantastic. Everything is good. Great with her answers and stuff like that. No more than 2 hours later did I see a different human being. It's the human being that you guys all see all the time. And I thought, whoa, is that what we're dealing with now? I'm going to pay attention to this one over the next, you know, for the remainder of her career. And it just played out the way it is. It was just one of those scenarios. I was like, man, you're not going to do good with the media. You're not, and that was in my heyday, guys. I said, you're not going to do good with the media if this is the way you act. If you're gonna, people will see through it. Over time, many people in the industry will see through a lot of fighters that come off great or terrible in interviews and are vice versa afterwards. So it takes time, but eventually people see through it all. And you see it in her post-fight interviews sometimes. You're just kind of like, oh my goodness, what did she just say? Or what is she doing? Right? But I want to say this about Jessica. This fight here versus Caitlin showed me some exceptional improvement in her boxing, guys. I thought she looked absolutely fantastic. I know it was a close fight. I really wanted Caitlin to somehow get that fight down on the ground to see if we could see more. But you got to give Jessica props. I mean, her aggressiveness, her cage control, and her willingness to continue to try and end that fight should be commended. She did really, really well with that for sure.
Yeah, not easy to frustrate a Caitlin Chookagian, who is so good at frustrating other fighters and probably frustrating Dana White, too. She has no finishes in her 6 UFC fights. Also, our boy Elias Theodorou, Fightful alumni. Between Tough and UFC, he has 10-2. Decisions aplenty. This was another one, and this one was close. A lot of people thought that Eric Anders won this one. Joe, what did you think of this as we kind of quickly wrap up this fight?
I scored it as a draw. 10-9 Elias first round, 10-8 Eric Anders the second round, 10-9 Elias in the third round. That gives me a draw of a scorecard. But you know, I looked at this fight originally and thought, you know, Elias is going to be in big trouble if Eric tees off on him, and Eric did tee off a few times, and Elias took it. Elias took it like a champ and just kept going and going and going. So kudos to him. I never compliment Joe Rogan. That's extremely rare, but I do compliment Joe Rogan. And the broadcasters in general, with John as well, you know, how they were describing Elias's style in the first round, because it was truthful. It was honest. He's a very difficult guy. The analogy of the curve, I think it was not the curveball, but there was another analogy, a changeup. He fights as if he was a changeup pitch, right? You just don't know what you're actually going to get. I think he did an absolutely great job to overcome adversity. And I mean, James, you missed it last week, but I said it to Sean. I said, if you're looking at me predicting an Elias fight, it's usually first round he feels his opponent out, second round he generally dominates, but third round we never know what's going to happen with Elias. He ends up screwing himself in third rounds. This one was completely different. He owned the first round, took a beating in the second round, came back in the third round. It shows the education and the evolution of the fighter. I think it was fantastic.
James, you were also there to see Gunnar Nelson just open up Alex Oliveira. Oh, gross.
Shades of Joe Stevenson and BJ Penn a little bit, in terms of the blood level. That was crazy. I mean, that elbow, you don't see it on the first shot, like when it was happening. You just see the submission and you see his face just looking like, 2% level on doom. But it was one of those things where, after you see that elbow and it just boom, just the blood comes out, and huge win for Gunnar Nelson. I mean, we're talking about a guy who was coming off a loss, had the layoff, and, pretty much was considered a bit of a write-off in the division. And this was a fight where he was fighting a much bigger guy, and he comes out there and gets an impressive finish. So big win here for Gunnar Nelson, who, seemed to really, kind of emphasize that he wants to be more active because he missed a lot of time this year with injuries.
There's really no way from a technical standpoint to break down Thiago Santos defeating Jimmy Manuwa. At one point, Thiago Santos went for Kofi Kingston's WWE finish named Trouble in Paradise. It did not hit, but the fight was outstanding. One of my favorite light heavyweight brawls of all time, James. This was a hell of a way to kick off a UFC pay-per-view after that prelim show, or that Fox Sports 1 prelim card, rather. The Fight Pass prelims ruled. That kind of slowed down. This was such a bipolar-paced show, and this was a great way to kick it off. Thiago Santos getting a win over Jimmy Manuwa. Manuwa, I think, is just falling. He stuck in there. If he connects, he could beat anybody, but that wasn't the case. Meanwhile, Thiago Santos has won 7 of his last 8. He's 2-0 at light heavyweight. I think the win over Eric Anders is a legit light heavyweight win because of how big Anders is. We're probably seeing him up there soon. What did you think of this fight? It was unbelievable to me.
Well, I want to echo what you said. I think this was a great placement on the card in terms of the matchup, but let's also talk about the matchup itself. This was great matchmaking. I mean, you have a new guy, sort of new blood in the division in Thiago Santos, taking on a guy in Jimmy Manuwa who's fought the who's who. And, Manuwa, let's be honest, 38 years old, not a lot of upside at this point. So he's fighting a guy who, by the way, I forgot about this, and they mentioned this in the media scrum. You remember Thiago Santos fought at welterweight at one point. So the fact that he's a light heavyweight now, a big light heavyweight, I should mention too, like he's a pretty solid guy, just speaks volumes to what his body has gone through over the last couple of years. But huge win for him. How crazy is it that him and Anthony Smith are having so much success moving up a weight class? I think that's great. And this is huge for Santos. I mean, I was saying this the other day, like you could almost do a tournament at 205 just with how many names are out there, and where do people fit in there? You've got Jan Blachowicz, you've got Dominic Reyes, you've got Anthony Smith, you've got Santos now, who's got a couple wins. I think the division's wide open right now, and it's really exciting.
What are your thoughts on this one?
Dude, come on, Sean. If I'm going to talk about Thiago Santos, I'm going to be smiling ear to ear non-stop. James, you know me long enough. This guy is violent. He is violence personified. He is a warrior that has come down from the heavens above that we probably saw thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago in the jungle, that no matter what, it's your life or my life. And that's how he fights. And he won't stop no matter how much pain he's in, because he got rocked in that fight by Jimmy Manuwa. The fight played out exactly how Sean and I had described it last week, James, that it's just going to be a disgusting display of awesomeness and violence. And it's exactly what happened. You get Thiago Santos at any time, whenever he competes, it's guns a-blazing, somebody's going to sleep. 9 times out of 10, somebody is going to sleep. That is the goal. This is not a guy that's going to sit there and bore us to sleep. Dana White should be coming out with his old school speeches, how when he complained about this is not the ultimate touching championship or the ultimate grappling championship or the ultimate holding against the fence championship. This guy is the ultimate fighter. He's the ultimate fighting. It's just fantastic. So I think he was great. If I can go back to the Gunnar Nelson thing for a second, Sean, the way he landed that elbow. So I've got this grappling doll that I had to order all the way from California. It cost me a fortune to get it shipped over here to my place here. It's life size, it's human, it's heavy, and it lets you work on your rear naked chokes, your arm bars, your leg locks, and your ground and pound. And I remember when I did a seminar up here, a couple seminars up here, where I was a guest with Greg Jackson. And when we were doing a bunch of things, he pulled me aside. He's like, how do you throw your elbow and mount? And I showed him what I was doing. He goes, perfect. Now I want you to do this as well. And it was the exact technique that Gunnar Nelson did. So when it actually was thrown, I was not only in awe, but when I saw the replay of how it was so the bone perfectly connected on Cowboy's skull, it did exactly what Greg Jackson said would happen if you do that in a real fight. And it was just awe-inspiring, although I feel terrible for Alex Oliveira, but man, I got to tell you, that technique that Gunnar Nelson had was also something that Jeremy Horn taught us way back when, about grabbing the wrist, guys, and letting your opponent dictate where your wrist goes. And as soon as they bring their elbow down, bang, you follow it up across, right? So kudos to Gunnar Nelson. What a fantastic fight that was.
Lots of stuff on this show, but I want to know, James, what stood out to you most? To me personally, there were two things outside of what we've talked about. Brad Katona hitting a Katawaki choke.
Right, yeah.
Which I couldn't believe it. A crucifixed rear naked choke. Didn't finish off Matt Lopez technically, but there was some discussion about that. Also, Nina Ansaroff beating Claudia Gadelha. We might have an MMA power couple with her and Amanda Nunes. That's unbelievable. But what stood out to you?
Yeah, the Ansaroff fight for sure. I think that was a big surprise to me anyways. I thought her getting the win over Claudia was impressive. And Claudia, I mean, you talked to her, pre-fight. I mean, she's pretty cocky. She's like, there's levels to this. I'm definitely, a lot better. I think Claudia underestimated Nina Ansaroff. They used to train together years ago at Masters MMA. Apparently, Claudia is saying she got the better of it. Well, it didn't look like it here. I don't know if the injuries or what the deal is with Claudia right now, but I mean, even her last fight, I think she arguably lost that one. So Claudia's really got to go back to the drawing board here. But Nina Ansaroff, I mean, who would have thought starting her career off, I think it was like in the UFC, I think it was like 1-3 or something like that. And now she's really turned things around and she's on, quite the winning streak. She'll probably get a top flight opponent next, just with how the division's working out. So good for her. And then the other surprise for me was Diego Lima. This is a guy who's going to lose his job. I looked at this fight on paper and I said, this is a fight that Chad Laprise is going to be set up to win here. Lima having that really disappointing performance against Yushin Okami, and he knocks him out. And now we got to start talking about Chad Laprise, now knocked out in 2 straight fights. We thought the chin issues were at 55. It looks like they're catching up to him at 170 now. Not a good look for him. I think Chad will get another fight just with the fact he's an Ultimate Fighter winner. And Diego Lima's got some life. That I've never seen someone so happy winning a UFC fight. That guy's always in a good mood. He's always in a good mood, but just the fact that, he got that win there was great. And maybe the only other thing, I thought was interesting is just Diego Ferreira going through 3 different opponents. Had a little bit of trouble early on, but eventually gets the win over Kyle Nelson, who's typically a featherweight. But just not so much him, but just the gym, Fortis MMA. They've been on a roll this year. They've really, Jeff Neal. They just have some really good fighters that have really been, putting that team on the map. And I think that was just sort of a culmination of that with the win he got on Saturday as well. So I thought that was impressive too.
Yeah, when you talk about Gadelha, she's a person who hasn't fought Rose Namajunas yet, and could have been right up there, but that loss.
Probably not fighting her now too. So
yeah, that's not going to happen for a while. Joe, anything else on this show stand out to you?
James, I thought Chad was going to lose the fight.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I just figured it. Although it was Diego Lima, and I thought, it could be 50-50 because both those guys have a tendency to now take punishment and then go down quick, or not go down quick, but the body shuts down. I just looked at this and I thought something about Diego Lima that may be able to get Chad's number. So I kind of figured that. Did
you put 5 in it though? Because you know what the odds were in the fight. Him winning in round 1 was plus 1,300.
I know. And to answer your question, I did not.
Woulda. Okay.
But yeah, the Gilbert Burns Olivier Mercier fight for me, Sean, was fantastic only because it showed some resolve in Olivier. He was not going to be able to get this fight to the ground, or if he did, he was not going to be able to play as much as with Gilbert. So he had to rely on his striking, and his striking did come across pretty damn well, if you ask me. It's just that Gilbert's just shined a bit more that night and did a great job. So there was one. Which fight was it? I think it was the Dawodu fight where one judge had it 29-28, while the other two had it 30-27 the other way. And I just thought to myself, what are you guys watching? What are you guys watching? How do you do that kind of stuff? I get it. But the one thing I didn't like about Hakeem was how he yelled at the doctor afterwards. I'm fine. Dude, doctors are doing their job. And the doctor backed off. And I don't blame the doctor for backing off because you're still going to go backstage and get checked out. But as a professional fighter, I know there's emotions and adrenaline involved. Let the doctor check you out. You could be perfectly fine. Let him or her check you out before you start or before you continue what you're doing. So I thought that was kind of
I was going to mention Hakeem. If you know him, he's a very intense guy. He's not your typical fighter. He's very, so seeing him do that didn't surprise me, just because he's not like I get it. He's got to be professional, but just knowing him, he's a different guy. He had a really difficult upbringing, so he's just not used to authority
too. Though he's a badass. You don't take out Karl Bochniak the way he did. I think he's going to do really good in the UFC. And as he gets more reps, Dana said it before, right? As the fighters get more reps in the octagon, they tend to shine a lot more. So look, pay attention to this featherweight. He's going to be really, really good in the UFC, in my opinion.
One more thing I got to mention before we move on, because I want to get this in here. Did you guys see me ask Claudia Gadea about the Instagram comment? Did you guys see this?
I didn't. What'd she say?
Oh gosh. Okay, so you know the whole backstory here, right? That she made that comment on Brian Ortega's Instagram like a few months ago, saying, "I want to have your babies." Did you see this?
Oh no, I didn't.
So I asked Claudia in the media scrum about that. I was like, "Hey, have you run into Brian this week?" Because that was a pretty, that comment went viral, and she starts blushing and she starts laughing, and it was the most priceless thing. And find the clip if you can, but I guess the Mac Life posted that little clip on there.
I see the thumbnail.
And the guy from Mac Life, Oscar, great guy. I've worked with him before. He's like, dude, you just saved my weekend. This went viral and everything. Like her reaction to it. So I thought that was pretty cool.
267,000 views.
Yeah.
My God. Yeah, she was blushing over that. We have UFC Milwaukee this Saturday. It's likely I'll do a post show after that. We'll probably talk to Bellator shows next week. May squeeze some of that in there. But we're going to preview UFC Milwaukee right now, give you some fight odds, things like that. Kevin Lee, a -310 favorite in a rematch against Iaquinta. Iaquinta beat him. Iaquinta a +255. I am a full believer that Kevin Lee is perhaps the future of this division, or at least one of the futures of the division. So does GSP. GSP says that he thinks that Kevin Lee will be the UFC's next big crossover star. I couldn't agree more. I think that had Kevin Lee not battled a staph infection, we're talking about somebody besides Tony Ferguson facing Khabib, or probably already has. I think that Kevin Lee's more well-rounded game gets it done. James, what do you think?
Yeah, I do. The odds, though, are a little bit scary to me in a way because, I mean, on paper, Lee is the better fighter, but Lee's had some holes where he gets caught every once in a while. Remember the Edson Barbosa fight? As dominant as he was in that one, he did get tagged in that fight, and we know the type of knockout power that Iaquinta has. If you're looking to put 5 in this fight, find the Iaquinta by knockout prop. That is something I think could potentially happen here. But saying that, I mean, Lee should get the win here. He's got really good wrestling. He's got really good striking. Overall, he has evolved a lot more than Al has since their first fight. He should win, but there's always that risk where he gets tagged. I mean, he got knocked out. Who's the guy who hasn't fought in forever? Jose Aldo's training partner. He knocked Kevin Lee out. I'm trying to remember his name, but Leo Santos. That's what I'm thinking of. So Lee has had issues like this, in where he's been tagged. So that's my only worry in this fight, just because Al is a really good striker. But I'm picking Kevin Lee.
Santos, an excellent fighter too. It's just he's 200 years old and never fights anymore. But I mean, Leonardo Santos, an awesome fighter. So I mean, getting knocked out by him, especially Kevin Lee, he was so young then. It was 3 years ago, but I agree with you. I would put 5 on the Iaquinta knockout situation. Joe, your thoughts on this fight?
I'm not putting 5 on that. Kevin Lee wins this fight. I think he dominates Al, although Al will put the pressure on him. We all know how Al Iaquinta fights. I just think it sucks that he's a real estate agent in New York, and I can't do mortgage deals for a fellow real estate agent in New York. But if I ever get my license in New York, I'm calling Al and say, dude, let's do some deals together. But I think, I mean, I just want to hear every single interview he does leading up to the fight, of course, leading up, fight week, and then, potentially post-fight, because he just makes me laugh and smile. I've got all the time in the world for him because I spent some quality time with him and the team, with Matt Serra and Ray Longo every time I went down to New York. So I just think Kevin Lee is just on another level right now. And Kevin Lee, I think come next, by next week's show, but come Sunday morning, we're all going to be thinking, this guy belongs up in the upper echelon of the division. So no ifs, ands, or buts.
Dan Hooker taking on Edson Barboza. This is a pretty even fight on as far as betting odds are concerned. Dan Hooker has won 5 of 6, won 4 in a row, all finishes, facing Edson Barboza, who has lost back-to-back fights for the first time in his career. However, those back-to-back fights, Kevin Lee, Khabib Nurmagomedov. His last loss before that, Tony Ferguson. Then you got Michael Johnson, who can just show up and beat anybody. It's just the way it works. Donald Cerrone, another one of his losses. So Edson Barboza generally only loses to top 5 talent. That seems to be the way that it goes. However, we don't know what the years have done to him. Dan Hooker definitely on the come up. He's 28 years old, a guy that the UFC likes. He finishes fights. I expect fireworks here, Joe. I think the odds are right where they should be on this one.
Yeah, I think you're correct in that. Not sure if James is going to agree, but I like where the odds are right now for both of these guys, only because it's going to show a lot of where Edson Barbosa is at the moment with his career, and it's also going to give us a telltale sign of Dan Hooker. Does he belong up there, right? And I think it's going to be an interesting scenario because I think I'm not saying the playbook is out there to how to defeat Edson Barbosa, but sometimes if you bully him, you end up emerging victorious. And Dan Hooker has a way of doing that. He can do it. So we'll see what happens there. But Edson Barbosa, if he uses his footwork and doesn't find himself in any trouble where he's may have a mental lapse in the fight or isn't getting beat up, tends to be so precise that he KOs people. We already know that. So it's a great dynamic in terms of a fight. It is one of those fights that I'm just like, you know what? Ref, step out of the way. Let me see these guys go.
We mentioned being back where somebody belongs. Maybe that's where Sergio Pettis, what he's doing. Back to bantamweight, 7-1 there in his career, James. He's a guy that even when he lost at bantamweight, I think he was in a fight of the night contender. So, I mean, performs very well there, but flyweight always seemed like an easy route to a title. As we learned, not so much for Sergio Pettis. I thought he would get a title shot for sure, but he's taking on Rob Font, and the betting lines have Sergio Pettis as a plus 145 favorite. The line isn't big enough for me to put 5 on it, but I would not be surprised to see Sergio Pettis surprise the betting line at least and emerge victorious here, but taking on a Rob Font who isn't going to make that easy, although he is a bit inconsistent. I think when facing some of the top of the line guys, he struggled. I mean, he knocked off Thomas Almeida, who isn't what we thought he would be, but how do you see this one going?
Yeah, I think to use a good pun here, I think Font's going to make a bold statement in this one. Taking out a really tough guy in Pettis. Look, here's the thing. Font's fought at that weight class more. Font's going to have a height and reach advantage in this fight. To me, usually when a guy moves up, you tend to favor the guy who's been in the division more, and I think that's fun. And I think the line's right where it needs to be. Pettis has all the tools. I mean, he's gotten close. I mean, much like Font. He's sort of lost to the top guys, or you think he's going to be close to a title shot and then he loses, or he has like a lapse in a fight, like kind of like Font did against Pedro Munoz and kind of like Sergio Pettis did against Ryan Benoit. So I mean, both these guys have been inconsistent in their career. The question is who's going to get it done. I'm leaning more towards Rob Font in this one. I just think, again, I think he'll be able to utilize his reach. He's not going to get in bad situations. And you look at his last fight, he lost to a guy who probably should be fighting for the title in Rafael Assunção. I mean, it's to me that's not a bad loss on your resume. I think Font gets it done. I think he uses his range well, and I think he probably takes home a decision. Nothing crazy, but I think he gets it done.
Yeah, he might flip the sand script on old Pettis.
Well, the underlying factor here,
God damn it,
is who's going to make an impact, right? So you got to take a look at, in my opinion.
You're giving me a lot of Helvicta over this.
No, honestly, it's Sergio Pettis, guys. The sense of urgency, right? Like if he doesn't have the sense of urgency, he's going to lose his fight.
Charles Oliveira minus 300 over plus 250. Jim Miller might be one I got 5 on because, quite frankly, the question just is, there's no way to break this down besides, James, does Jim Miller guillotine Charles Oliveira? Does Charles Oliveira choke Jim Miller? That's how I fully expect this fight to go down one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, Jim Miller's 35 years old. He got a nice win in his last fight over Alex White, but I think in general, you just look at he was on a 4-fight losing streak before that. Oliveira's been a little bit more consistent there. I think Oliveira's, he's got to prove his worth here. I mean, he's also had some laps here. I mean, he lost that fight to Felder. This is not a fight I'm confident in. I think Oliveira should potentially win this fight just in terms of the age and just the run he's been on. But it's Jim Miller, man. You can't count this guy out. I think the value here for sure is on Miller. Oliveira, there's so many. I mean, is he going to make weight? There's all these things with this guy. It's never been about consistency with him. So I see Oliveira probably winning by submission, but you never know with him.
Joe, is Oliveira in the division now? And by the division, I mean Guida, Lozon, Sanchez, Miller, all these guys that you just throw their name in a hat, pick one out. Chiesa was kind of there for a little while. Maybe Evan Dunham ends up there, but it's just one of those guys you can throw on a Fox main card, and it's like, all right, yeah, sure, fine, whatever.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I mean, 8 years ago, almost to the day, Jim Miller did tap out Charles Oliveira with a knee bar. I was there live for that one, and it caught me by surprise because I thought Oliveira was the future of the division. I thought Jim Miller was going to have his hands full. Well, he had his hands full of somebody's leg and submitted him. So when you're talking about putting 5 on somebody, Jim Miller's already got a victory over him, number one, and that will play in Charles Oliveira's head for a bit. It could happen at any time. We all know that some fighters can be mentally strong, some can be mentally unstable. So pay very close attention to that. At plus 250, I think Jim Miller has it. In terms of Oliveira and what he now brings to the cage with the difference since they last fought 8 years ago, yeah, man, Charles Oliveira can bring it. He can definitely bring it, and there's a reason why he's a minus 300. I think a lot of that has to do – I don't think that's smart money, James or Sean. I think that's more the public that's kind of taking those odds and separating them. Can he pull off the victory? Hell yes, of course he can pull off the victory. I just, you never count Jim Miller out, especially when he has a win over someone there. But, James said it. Jim's older. You never just know when these guys can start saying, okay, body shuts down. Either way, I think it's going to be a fun fight, so let's enjoy it while we can.
I told James off the air that Eric Spicely, a UFC fighter that he's interviewed, has a WWE tryout. Juan Adams, who makes his UFC debut, had a WWE tryout earlier this year. He is a minus 400. I will put 5 on Chris De La Rocha, even though I don't expect him to win. That is a heavyweight fight, plus 325. Maybe some value there, but I do expect Juan Adams to win. Another fight that I am interested in is Andrea Lee, minus 255, taking on Jessica Rose Clark, plus 215. All things equal, I expect Jessica Rose Clark to lose this fight. All that Andrea Lee's been through, you never know what that can do to someone. Apparently, guys, Donnie Aaron's still on the loose. Yeah. What? James, yeah. I want to know what you think of this prelim show and anything that stands out to you before we move on.
Yeah, there's a couple things in here. I'll kind of just zoom through sort of some interesting tidbits here. So Andrea Lee, she is training with Aspen Ladd. She had trained with her before, but I think sort of the focus of her camp has been there for this one, obviously because of all the issues that are happening back home. So glad to see she's getting some good, because I think Aspen's amazing. So getting to work with her is great. Jessica Rose Clark also switched camps. She's no longer at Syndicate. She's now at Extreme Couture. So getting some different looks over there. And the big thing that, at least when I spoke to her, she quit drinking, and I guess she had a problem with alcohol, and I guess that was affecting her performance. And she also sort of mentioned that her last fight, she was kind of getting away from her roots. So for this fight, she's sort of going to go back to what she's great at, which is her grappling. And we were talking earlier about title contenders. I mean, if Andrea Lee wins this fight, she's got to be up there too. She was a former LFA champion. She's someone that I know people are still not fans of her because of her defending her husband at the time, but she's got some talent. So big fight here for the flyweight division. I'm interested to see how Dwight Grant does. He's a teammate of Daniel Cormier as an American Top Team. He fights at 170, but he's looking to shine here. Actually has a new opponent. He was supposed to. Zach Otto's coming in on short notice here to take the fight. Dwight Grant's a favorite. I think that's right where it needs to be. This Adam Milstead and Mike Rodriguez fight is interesting too. Adam Milstead basically said if he doesn't win this fight, he's retiring from MMA. He's done. So a lot on the line here for him to win this one. And for Mike Rodriguez, he's got to bounce back from that really disappointing performance against Devin Clark at the New York card. So he's looking to get back in there. And I'm with you on Juan Adams. I mean, Juan is 6'5", and he's got some crazy reach. I think it's like 80 or something. It's 81. So, I mean, he's just able to bully his opponents. That's sort of what he did on Contender Series, which got him the contract. But Chris De La Rocha, this guy, we saw it in his last fight where he got that win over Rashad Coulter. He can surprise, and don't let age fool you. This guy has some talent, and there is a bit of revenge here because Coulter is actually a training partner of Juan Adams. So Juan wanted this fight. He's getting this fight. He's got to go in there and prove it. So those are sort of the things that stand out to me on the prelims as far as the fights. And I'm also looking forward to this Dan Ige and Jordan Griffin fight. Rival gyms here, Extreme Couture with Dan Ige, Jordan Griffin out of Rufus Sport. Should be a great fight, and two guys really looking to make their names in the featherweight division.
We have a pair of Bellator shows Friday and Saturday, and to be honest with you, they're pretty good shows. Like from top to bottom, some name value, some prospect, both in Hawaii, back-to-back nights. They're doing this here and there. A salute to the troops show, and then you have Alimale McFarland on Saturday. On Friday, you finally have Brent Primus, Michael Chandler. Michael Chandler is an enormous favorite. I do expect him to win this. Joe, what do you think?
You're not going to be able to convince me otherwise. I think he wins. I mean, it's just what happened in that first fight. If he can keep his mind in check, and I know he has because I talked obviously with Kamaru and stuff like that and what's happening over at in Florida at Hard Knocks. So Chandler is something special. I mean, Chandler is something else. And, you know, what happened in that first fight with the leg injury, he finally gets the opportunity to take on Brent. That's not to say Brent's not a fantastic fighter, because he damn is. I just think Michael Chandler has his number, and I think we're going to see it at Bellator 212. Anything can happen in a fight. We know that, but I'm obviously leaning towards Michael Chandler in this fight. The guy's something special.
James?
I think there's value in Primus here, to be honest. I think a lot of people look at that first fight and say there's an injury, and there's this whole narrative where everyone's on Michael Chandler's side. Like, if you saw the press and everything, Primus wasn't getting any play in terms of what happened in that fight, and then this was supposed to get booked, and then stuff happened. It seemed like the media narrative has sort of been against Primus, so I imagine he's got a chip
since then.
Well, that's true, but he became a father. He had some injuries. There's a bunch of stuff that happened in between there, just talking to his management group. And I think Primus is still a great fighter. I think people can't be blinded by the fact that, yes, there was an injury in the first fight, but Brent Primus is still pretty good himself. 8 straight wins, undefeated. I mean, Chandler on paper is the better fighter. I think the odds are where they need to be, but I might throw 5 on Primus here, because I think, again, the pressure here is on Chandler. He has to win. He chose to re-sign with Bellator. He probably could have gone to the UFC.
Yeah.
He's had all these opportunities, and this is it. He's got to back it up. If he can't get this win here, it's going to look terrible. No one's expecting Brent to win, but Brent could have that potential where he could go in there, got nothing to lose. People are counting me out. He could surprise people. So I wouldn't count out Brent Primus in this fight completely.
Yeah, even before that, it had been about 14 months since he had fought before that. So he needs to be more active regardless. You also have Frank Mir and Javi Ayala. That's just going to be probably either Frank Mir taking Javi Ayala down and submitting him, or Javi Ayala connecting with a punch, cracking him, knocking him out. You have AJ McKee on the show. He is an undefeated prospect, essentially, that is quickly emerging up the ranks. Taiwan Claxton is on the prelims. That's a name to look out for. When I say that Bellator is confusingly run, how about Chris Avila being booked on this show? Arguably the worst UFC fighter I've seen this side of CM Punk. Was bounced out of the UFC, lost to Artem Lobov, bounced out of the UFC months later, signed by Combate, lost his way out of there, lost another fight in between, has not won since. He's still in this Bellator show. James, anything on this 212 show that you're particularly looking forward to outside of the main event?
No, this is what, yeah, I mean, I think for me, Taiwan Claxton is the real deal. Everything I hear at Hard Knocks is this guy's, legit. AJ McKee, I think just getting a fight to keep him warm. But I mean, McKee at this point, I mean, he's pretty much done enough to earn himself a title shot. So I think this is just one of those situations where they just want to keep him active. I think Derek Campos and Sam Sicilia is going to be a good fight. 2 guys, veterans really looking to make a name for themselves. So I'm excited for that one. And the women's fight should be good. Alejandra Lara coming off the loss to Ilima McFarlane, looking to bounce back against this undefeated Brazilian prospect, Juliana Vasquez. So yeah, I mean, this is a great card. Again, I hate how they do the back-to-back cards. It's tough. Like, as a dad, as someone who has other stuff going on, I got to pick and choose. I'll probably PVR one, watch the other one live, but it's just a shame that it's just a lot. And then we have the Milwaukee card as well. So there's a lot going on this weekend. Yeah,
and I'll probably try to do a live show after the Milwaukee show. But to be honest with you, this Saturday night Bellator show is real good. Ilima McFarlane against Valerie Letourneau. Joe, who you got in that one?
Oh, it's a good fight. I really like that fight. I think McFarlane takes it. I think she's just got that edge. Not to say Valerie doesn't still have it. She's a veteran of the sport. I just think McFarlane takes this fight.
I think one of the best fights of this weekend is Ed Ruth and Neiman Gracie. From an interest, like, I am so interested in this fight, James. Bellator welterweight Grand Prix opening round. A couple of undefeated fighters. We know Neiman Gracie's strength. It's on the ground, but that's Ed Ruth's strength too, and he's real good there. Also, he can put you to sleep. I'm real interested in that. I think Ed Ruth gets it done.
I do too. And, Ed Ruth switched camps. Dethrone base camp is pretty much over. Like, a lot of those guys had to leave. Josh Koscheck now running a business, apparently in North Carolina. So the gym's still running, but not like a pro team. So interested to see if those adjustments will make a difference. I'm actually pretty intrigued by the co-main event too. Lyoto Machida, Rafael Carvalho. Was it just that Carvalho fought not great competition and that he has this record? Or is it the fact that he just lost to a really good guy in Gegard Mousasi? We're going to find out, because Machida, I mean, he's had his moments where he's still shown signs of life in the 185-pound division. I mean, he chose to sign with Bellator. It looked like the UFC wanted to keep him. So we'll see a lot. I mean, personally, I kind of want to see Machida win so we get that rematch with Gegard Mousasi, because, there was a lot. Gegard, if you watch those interviews, he accused Lyoto of a few things. So,
oh, yeah.
That's great. Yeah. So,
Joe, who do you have in Machida Carvalho?
Very good question. I mean, that's just me thinking out loud in terms of what does this actually like? What actually will take place in this fight in terms of is Lyoto, has he completely slowed down? Because if Carvalho gets a hold of him, it's going to be ugly. Like it will be ugly for Lyoto. But can he get a hold of him? Because if he can't, I think his face is going to be just bobbing back and forth. So I'm going to lean towards Lyoto in this fight. How's that?
I think I will as well. We have Derek Campos and Sam Cecilia on Friday night as well. Not a major mountain moving fight, but King Mo, Liam McGeary is one that people are going to recognize from a name value. I think it has the makings to be a completely boring fight. It really does. I think I see a good fight here. Man, I would be shocked if we see a good King Mo fight at this stage.
Oh, wow.
I think we may never see another good King Mo fight again. And, I think he's going to win it. I just think he's going to win it. Joe, what do you think as we wrap up?
If Muhammad's going to win?
Yeah, 38 next month, by the way.
Yeah, I think Liam McGeary takes this fight. I really do. I know, he's not who he was in the past. He's lost 3 of his last 4. One of them was to Vadim Nemkov, though, and Linton Vassell. So I think Liam McGeary is going to wake up from this bad little skid here, and just take out Lawal somewhere or another. I can see what you're saying. It could be a boring fight, potentially a maul and brawl fight, but I think Liam's knees are going to be flying left and right here, and he'll catch Muhammad.
I think that Muhammad would catch one of those knees and drag him to the ground and probably sit in side control forever. James, it's very humbling to hear King Mo's going to be 38 next month. I remember when he was like the late 20-year-old prospect in Sengoku in Japan and all that stuff. And you were talking about King Mo weight. He would fight at any weight and all that stuff. And he still does, but a nice name for Bellator to throw on the early part of this show, I think.
Yeah, and one of the other reasons I think this fight could be really boring too is they're friends. I mean, they didn't want to fight each other, and there was some reluctance on both ends of taking the matchup. But it's business; they got to take care of it. And McGeary's no spring chicken either. He's 36 years old. He's actually moved. His family actually moved to Hawaii, but he's actually training in California for this camp with like Joey Beltran and those guys. I forget what gym that is. So he switched things up because obviously what he was doing wasn't working. We'll see. I mean, I think the wrestling, like you guys sort of touched on, will work well. And I should mention too, King Mo, a big part of Alexander Rakic's camp, who just won this past weekend in the UFC 231 card. So, getting in a lot of good work because Mo's an American Top Team now.
I will have a wrap-up podcast Saturday night. Hopefully, I'll be able to cover all 3. It is a busy weekend. Ring of Honor Final Battle on Friday. Reminder, follow us at Fightful MMA or Fightful Online. You can go to FightfulMMA.com. Want to welcome you guys to our discus boards on those. We're trying to grow that community slowly but surely. Most direct way to support Fightful is FightfulSelect.com, our subscription service. But leave a thumbs up on this video and subscribe. I really want to get us to 1,000 subscribers. You all can follow James at Lynch on Sports. You can follow Joe at Showdown Joe, myself at Sean Ross Sapp. I want to thank you guys so much for joining us. Till next time,